Okay, we'll get going. Okay, we'll get going. Okay. Call a meeting to order. Good evening, everyone. Two quick comments. First of all, tomorrow is Blood Donor Day, so if you haven't scheduled your appointment, please go out there and schedule an appointment to drip for a good cause. And today actually begins National Little League Week in Canada, pronounced by Honorable Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister. Week of June 12th to 18th provides an opportunity for all Canadians to recognize the important role Little League Baseball plays in the lives of youngsters across the country. Baseball is a team sport that helps develop fundamental athletic skills when played at a young age, while instilling values such as teamwork and fair play that last a lifetime. So, National Little League Week. Do you have anything to add, Mr. Clerk?
I played Little League.
I'm inspired. You haven't pushed your button. Councillor Towner.
I just want to say, since he brought up the topic of Little League Week, that Coquitlam Little League announced this week that Curtis Taylor, a Coquitlam Little League alumni, got drafted to the Arizona Diamondbacks this week.
Oh, wow.
Major League draft.
Coquitlam is again in the major leagues. We have been in the past and repeatedly, so it's wonderful news. Now, do you have anything to add, Mr. Clerk? You played Little League.
I have item 1.
Okay.
Item 1 is the minutes of the town hall meeting held on Saturday, May 7th. Recommendation is to approve.
Moved by Councillor Marsden, second by Councillor Zerillo. Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, I think it's worth getting on the record in this regular council meeting. One of the issues, it's on page 10 of the minutes. There was a question online from a Mr. Howard McCaskill talking about whether or not councillors whose spouses work for the school system are in a conflict of interest when voting on school issues. And the mayor is noted in the minutes as saying absolutely not, and for a variety of reasons. And I could certainly elaborate on that, and any one of us could. But this is not the first time I've heard something like that. My wife used to work in the school system as an employee, and I never did understand how somebody who's an employee of an organization, such a school system, would benefit from any decision that I might make. If she were an owner of the school system and I were to make a decision perhaps on land use of some land that the city might have zoning power over, and she would benefit from that as an owner, that might be some sort of conflict. But in a way, we are all owners of the public school system. And So there's no conflict there. But this does come up now and again, and I'm glad it came up at this meeting, and I'm glad the mayor answered so clearly, and I just wanted to underline that that there is no conflict, even though I'm not in that situation anymore. There are other people here who are, and I'm glad it got dealt with. Thank you.
No, absolutely. And in fact, those of us whose spouses or other family members might be employed by the system, they're already employed. They get no more money if the school system expands or contracts.
Exactly.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. The motion is the minutes. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 2 pertains to the minutes of the public hearing held on Monday, May 30th. Recommendation to approve.
Moved by Councillor Marsden, second by Councillor Asmundson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 3 is minutes of the regular council meeting also held on Monday, May 30th. Recommendation to approve.
Moved by Councillor Marsden, second by Councillor... Oh, I'll go with Zarello only because she voiced it. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Councillor Wilson, you have to do more than put up your hand if you want to compete.
Item 4 concerns minutes of the Multiculturalism Advisory Committee meeting of Wednesday, May 18th. Recommendation to receive.
Moved by Councillor Asmundson, second by Councillor O'Neill. Councillor Zarello.
I just had a quick, on the first page, there was talk of a group photo. What a great idea. I'm wondering if it's possible to do group photos. I'm thinking maybe it was someone from the committee that did the group photo, but is it possible for all of our committees to have a yearly keepsake? Have a group photo done?
I think that if members of the committee would like to take a photo, I think arranging for a photographer to do the rounds would pose some challenges, I guess, for lack of a better term. But we support committees commemorating their time. We believe that the committees themselves provide valuable input and would be supportive of all that they could do to commemorate their contributions to the city.
That would be great. I think maybe we'll bring that, and then we'll just have to ask for permission to distribute among the committee, or?
Well, I think members of the committee could choose to participate in the photo or not as per their wishes, and I think their desire to be part of the photo would then give their permission to use it. I'm thinking that would stick to themselves, that we wouldn't distribute them more widely.
Yeah. Just 125th year, it might be interesting, but thanks. I thought that was a great idea.
Absolutely, and when we do volunteer recognition, that kind of photo would prove useful. The members of a committee could opt in, and opting in it would be de facto release of the permission to use the photo, I would think. Good idea. Thank you, Councillor Asmundson.
Well, thank you. Well, the reason for the photo for the committee is to deal with Canada. The Multiculturalism Committee is part of the Coquitlam booth, and there's to be a banner there to explain what the Multiculturalism Committee is, and it's just showing the members to the community who's on the committee and the role that it does as we do our Canada Day booth with the events that we have within there. So that's why the photo was taken of the Multicultural Committee. Thank you.
There you go. Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you. I think I've spoken on this issue before. I think it's been in a public forum. I hope so. If not, this is all new. I'm strongly in favor of doing more to celebrate all of our committees. I don't think we do enough. I've spoken to various city staff about it. There are some logistical problems in terms of the resources, in terms of getting these things done. But I think that there should be more than just a simple listing of the committees we have on our website. I think we should have greater description of the work that they're doing. Yearly, we should update the names of the people who are serving on the committee, put that on the website, have a picture of the committee as well. I think it shows very clearly that we're better engaged with the community, and it celebrates those who are doing work with the city as well. So that needs to be, I think it's an active thing that we should be considering. Now, so different committees have different approaches and are able to get different things done. But I would like to see all committees celebrated in this way and their work shared with, more of their work shared with the public. I think it'll really increase connections with the community if we do that. Thanks.
Absolutely. Sounds good. No other comments. The question is the minutes. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
first report of staff, item 5, concerns a proposed road cancellation application adjacent to 525 Foster Avenue. This is bylaw number 4687. Staff recommendations that council give first, second, and third readings to City of Coquitlam Highway Dedication Cancellation Bylaw number 4687, and that direct that bylaw 4687 be advertised in accordance with the requirements of the community charter.
Second.
With moved by Councillor Marsden, second by Councillor Asmussen. I had one question that I'd already posed to staff to prepare them for my question tonight. Under financial implications on page 2, it says market valuation to be established later. Does staff have an approximate market valuation of these 300-something or 200-something square feet? 236 square feet. Mr. Sinisha.
Through your worship, the market value of that little piece of property at present is estimated to be in the $47,000 range.
About $200 a foot.
About $80 buildable per foot.
Good. That's a 2.5, obviously.
Based on 2.5 FAR.
Okay. Nobody else? Motion is road cancellation. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item number 6 is the Spirit of Coquitlam grants. This is the spring 2016 intake. Staff recommendations that council endorse disbursements from the Community Capital Fund totaling $252,529, which includes $200,529 in Spirit grants as part of the spring 2016 intake and $52,000 to support Coquitlam's 2016 Communities in Bloom initiatives.
Moved by Councillor Marsden, second by Councillor Towner. Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you very much. I don't normally go through the detailed reports with my editor's pen and make it public, but there's a little humorous one here on page 3. The support for Communities in Bloom, the $52,000 would go to toy library structures, which I imagine would be tiny little libraries that can be used as toys. Actually, I think it meant toy library. It should be a hyphenated adjectival phrase, and that's a theme that I've used here on council for 5 years. There should be a hyphen between the toy and the library, so we know it's a toy library structure, not a toy library structure. Anyway, that's a little tiny thing on my part. So that's not the reason I pushed my button, though.
Well, apparently it pushed your buttons.
It did. I'll push other people's buttons. So going through here, I wonder if the general manager of Parks, Rec and Culture could comment on whether or not, so I know that we have certain criteria for approving grants, and among these criteria are that is one that we should not grant monies towards fundraising efforts because it's sort of redundant. They're trying to raise money, and why should we give them money for them trying to raise money? Do all of the are there any of these grant recipients who are receiving money as part of a fundraising effort? And if so, how do they get on the list?
Mr. Aloueva.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Yes, there's a few on the list. The Terry Fox Foundation, Terry Fox Run, and the Training Run, both are fundraiser efforts, and those are traditional that Council has supported them in the past, and they're in a sense, annual exceptions to that rule for just historic kind of traditional reasons. The Kinsman grant this year does have fundraising associated with it. And so it is an exception. I don't believe there's any other that would be in that list.
So staff is recommending that that these exceptions take place. How does staff come to a recommendation like this that's not part of the regular criteria for approval?
Yes, well, the grants are, there's a process, so it's a biannual event. There's two intakes a year. So grant requests or applications are received by the city in the spring and the fall. There is a process that we follow. It's a detailed review process, and it's based on compliance with the council adopted criteria and eligibility guidelines. But that process is broad, and that process is complicated. And at each intake, there are some decisions made in the larger process, and there are cases where projects rise above certain criteria and are supported for a number of reasons.
Can you be any more specific than that on these three that you mentioned?
Sure. Through the chair, the Terry Fox Foundation and Terry Fox Training Run. Terry Fox Foundation Run is historical, and council has supported that annually. It is very much in the spirit of Coquitlam to support that, and councils in the past have supported it because of its tradition in the history of Terry Fox in the Tri-Cities. The Terry Fox Foundation Training Run is a relatively new addition to that to their program, and that was added again essentially as a companion and add-on to that first event that council has supported historically. The Kinsman Coquitlam grant. Council has supported the Kinsman in the past on a number of cases. There's typically for equipment and furniture associated with their fundraising efforts. This particular one is for equipment to support a number of community events and organizations. In other words, it would support other organizations in their efforts, and as a result of that evaluation process, which is quite detailed, we are supporting that grant.
So when you have the listing here on page 4 and 5 of these grants, for both the Terry Fox Foundation ones, the training run and the regular run, you've got a little note there, a star asterisk. It said fundraisers are typically not approved. Fundraising are typically not approved for the next one, retroactive applications and fundraising. There's no star beside the Kinsman one. Is that an oversight? Should there have been a star there talking about how fundraisers of this sort are typically not approved?
I suspect that it is. Yes, that's correct.
So
It should have had that as well.
So it's
our apologies. It is in the same. It is same
category.
Okay.
Yes. And so that's all the questions I have now. Thank you.
Councillor Towner.
Thank you. I also wanted to speak about the Community in Bloom initiative here. Today, a newspaper article came out about the Spirit Grant disbursements, and the Community in Bloom initiative was described as a national contest to make the city's streets and parks prettier. So I just wanted to take a minute for anybody watching and listening tonight, to clarify that this is a community-driven initiative, and it's much more than making our streets look prettier. It's, I will read off just a few of the initiatives that the Community in Bloom's activities entail, and that includes tidiness, cleaning up litter, eradicating graffiti, environmental action, managing our waste, making a difference through sustainable development initiatives. There's a heritage conservation piece, preserving Coquitlam's heritage, urban forestry, managing forests with an integrated sustainable plan, community members care for trees. There's a landscape piece, maintaining Coquitlam's landscapes, businesses making our city greener, and there are floral displays, community gardens, and whatnot. But really, in the big picture of it, it's really a community engagement initiative, which incorporates a lot of community volunteerism and a lot of community spirit. So it's much more than just having flowers and hanging baskets on our streets. And I just wanted to take a minute to expand on that. And there's much more information about this on our city's website. Thank you.
Councillor Zerillo.
Well, I've got a few questions on this one, and I've numbered them out. I've got 5 so far. I might get another one. The first question I have for staff through the chair is, are the grant applications confidential or are they a public record?
Mr. Alueva.
Grant applications are public record. The ones that we are issuing today are public record, and all of those that we did not approve can also be made public. There's no disclosure issues on those. We advise all of the applicants that are not successful and we have a regular dialogue with them, and we could certainly produce a list of those that did not receive a grant to council.
So anyone can go and look at the grant applications to see which ones passed and potentially get hints
Yes.
and tips from them.
Yes.
Okay, number 2. I wanted to talk a little bit about the financial implications. Basically, my question was, how much is in the Spirit Grant Fund? Like, how much money did we have to work with for this intake?
Yes, through the chair. This year, there's a little bit more pressure on the Spirit Grant funding. The Spirit Grant funding comes from the Community Capital Fund, and typically that's funded through the casino host agreement. A fair bit of funding has already been allocated from that fund to the number of significant projects this year by council from last year and onward, and that's primarily the 125 celebrations as well as the 55 plus games. So we were very close, and so there was in the order of $208,000 left in the Community Capital Fund, and that has been supplemented to match the council's request, or what we're asking council today, which is $252,000.
Okay, so where do we supplement? And I'm just asking you this just in the interest of transparency for our taxpayer. So we needed to subsidize the Spirit Grant for this intake. Where did that money come from?
I believe it's from contingency.
Okay.
But I may be corrected.
Staff are about to.
Oh yes, my apologies. Okay, thank you. My apologies. I was just reminded it was from the local area service funding.
Okay, and that's a new one for me. So are we borrowing from local area service and we'll pay back when we get, or are we? Okay.
No, I believe it was a direct fund from that budget.
Okay. So can you give me a bit of an idea about what sort of things are eligible for the LAS? I'm asking because maybe Community in Bloom can come from LAS, or the Terry Fox grants or something like that could come from LAS.
Thank you. Yes, through the chair. It's a good question. I'm sure the viewers out there don't know what the LAS fund. Local Area Service Fund is essentially a fund that was created by council for matching funds for residents who want upgrades to street services to finish road frontage works, could be curbs, finishing streets, sidewalks, etc. So that fund would not be something that could be accessed by some of the things that have been mentioned by Councillor Zurillo.
Have we used it? I mean, I haven't heard about it before. Have we used it? Have we had matching?
Yes, it has been used in the past, again, through the chair on a few occasions, but because it requires matching dollars from a set of neighbors in a neighborhood, it is really hit and miss, and really depends on the demands in a particular neighborhood and the willingness on the part of those owners to make the investment, which would then be matched by the city on a percentage basis. Don't have the percentage exactly. I think it was 50 to 60. I don't have the number in front of me.
Okay.
But it is specific for frontage works.
Okay, so then obviously my next question is, how much did we remove from the LAS to put into community, what do we call this one? Community...
If I could just clarify a couple of those issues.
Mr. Steblin.
I really hate to contradict our esteemed General Manager of Parks, but the intent of this was a loan, was temporary funding from a different service. So, I mean, and we left it up to Sheena to allocate which fund it would come up with, but the intent was not to structurally change the funding that would go to grants. It's just that this one particular intake took a little bit more funding than was available, and it would be an advance on the next intake. And so I really think the line of questioning, really long-term equity between funds, is not really all that. That should not be the direction of the questioning. It should be more just, should we be giving this grant? And the purpose of the interim financing was just take it out of some reserve that didn't need the money just for that period of time. The intent, at least my intent in terms of giving the direction to Sheena, was to make it as an interim funding source.
So I appreciate the comments from the city manager, and so then that leads me to my number 3 question, because I haven't experienced this yet being on council. But what is our policy if the fund is drained at any intake? Like, do we have a policy around that says this is the fund that we go to and this is the interim? Like, do we have a policy in place for that?
In this particular case, I believe this is the first time we've actually allocated grants in excess of the funding that was there, so we do not have a policy. This was a specific issue that we felt would be appropriate on a very short-term basis to go over the amount of funding on an interim funding policy basis, and it is not intended to be to our standard practice. So we don't really think we have to get into a large policy discussion on that.
Okay, I just, sometimes the exceptions, we think the exceptions won't come, but maybe they will, and if it happens again, maybe we can discuss it. So right now we're at an interim loan, basically, from the LAS to this grant, and it'll get paid back once we get, when do we get our next delivery from the casino grant through the chair?
I believe we get them in 4 times a year.
Okay. So that was my question 3. And then my question 4 was, what if we don't have the funds through the Spirit? So what happens? So, I mean, we don't have a policy, but has it ever happened in the past that we don't have the funds to fund Spirit grant applications? And how much, I guess, yeah. Has that ever happened through the chair, through the staff?
As I said, I believe, at least in my time here, we've always had balance in the bank, and that this is the first time we've actually come up against that limit, which is a good thing, because the policy decision of council of the day was to take a portion of the casino revenues and to give it back to the community through these grants. And the fact that these different community groups are applying for and getting eligibility for these grants means that that funding is going back to the community as intended by the council policy.
Okay, so if I could just ask through the chair to staff for next time, is if in the financial implication piece we can just have almost like you would in a bank account, what was the opening balance and what's the ending balance would be awesome for next time. My 5th question is, in anticipation, is there any anticipation of budget needed for Community in Bloom again next year? I'm asking that question because, again, I'm wondering if we should be funding it from a different source.
Yes, thank you. I think the question was raised in committee or previously when it came forward before council. If I recall, I think we indicated that it really would be up to council. At this point, we don't have it's not an operating issue. We went, after many years not being in Communities in Bloom, we came back last year, and we did want to go back this year again, just building on that, on the good work that was done last year. We don't have any intention of doing this on a regular basis. We would look to potentially bring it forward to council if they wished for us to go forward. It would be an issue that they could deal with at the budget time later this year, but it's not our intent to have this as a regular standing kind of operating item.
Okay, well, thank you for that. So I'm just going to ask the question one more time about the LAS. What was our interim commitment from the LAS to fund this intake and potentially the one before we get another delivery?
In terms of the total amount?
Yeah.
I believe it was just under $45,000. I think it was $44,092, something to that. I believe that's the number.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Asmussen.
Thank you very much. Going on the vein from Councillor Zerillo is that come September, we have 2 intakes a year. So what do we expect, or will we be canceling the intakes for this fall for the Spirit grants due that we've used more money? And we took $300,000, was it, from the LAS? Is that going to be the money for the fall intake minus the withdrawal?
Mr. Alueva.
Yeah, the withdrawal that was required from the LAS is $44,000. So there, at this point, we do believe that we will be looking at what is available next year, and we felt that we would need to do an additional allocation later this year to do the next fall intake, depending on when we get the next input from the casino agreement. We'll have to wait and see. We will bring information to council in the fall on the next intake.
Okay, because ever since I've been on here, we've always had money, or we haven't used all the money within the account, and we've always had to do the criteria on it. And I'm going off the vein of Councillor O'Neill's questions about, there's 3 here that don't meet, or some was long-standing. One was one that we worked retroactively to help them out with the training run, and there's some other issues, I think, going forward to redirect that somewhere else. I think there were some about the training run from a different department in their future funding, I think, rather than through Spirit Grant.
Mr. Allouez.
I'm trying to jog my memory. Excuse the pun. I do recall it is being brought forward under the Spirit Grant for the reason that typically it would be ineligible as a fundraiser. What we had advised the Terry Fox Foundation is that we would like them to bring both the Terry Fox run and their training run together in the fall for the following year. But we have still indicated that it would be through the Spirit Grant process.
Okay, now the last point I get down to is it came down to did staff recommend the funding towards the Kinsman, or was that, since it didn't meet the guidelines, was it included or not included in their recommendation?
The report before council today does recommend in favor of the grant. The process that we went through was very detailed, and it involved many steps, and through that process it did come out as supportable.
But did it meet the requirements of the criteria going forward that everybody else applies under?
And not on the basis of the fundraising.
Okay. My point is here that we've gone this far with the Kinsman on this. What my concern is that I've been on council for a number of years and tried to separate this as to be an application form, criteria. We run a class on people how to apply to the program, how to apply properly, and to fit in the guidelines of the program. I'm always very concerned that when we make a recommendation to support something outside the guidelines, unless we change the guidelines moving forward, to be fair to everybody else out there, because we start to pick and choose. Now, I have great concerns about picking and choosing outside the guidelines, because we're going to have other people out there, and I think the organization is a fantastic organization, deserves all the credit and support that we can give it. But I think we have to be careful and fair to all the other organizations that are applying and making applications and making sure that everybody follows the same rules. And so I have concerns about that part when we make these exceptions, that we are not treating everybody fairly. And I have a lot of concerns from that point. Thank you.
You, Councillor Marsden.
Thank you very much. I want to thank staff for all the work that you've done on this. And like my colleagues, I think we did have a lot of discussion with regards to the source of the money, where it should go, and what qualified, what didn't qualify. To the point that Mr. Allouez said, wasn't sure about the Communities in Bloom question that was asked. Your memory is accurate, sir. I asked the question very directly, and you responded identical to how you did tonight, and that is, we did it last year, we're looking at doing it this year, and if there's anything to continue, it would be looked at as part of an ongoing budgetary component through your department. So I think that was sufficient to raise my comfort level with utilizing these funds, the Community Capital Fund, for that purpose. That said, we do have a lot of, as you said, a lot of things through the 55-plus games, the 125 birthday celebrations. There's a lot of stuff that have called upon this fund to leave it in the state it's in right now. I think from the points that Councillor Asmussen was just making about the Kinsman, what qualified, what didn't qualify, there absolutely were elements of the request that were fundraising in exactly what they would do. The Kinsmen do raise funds. It's one of a multitude of great organizations we've got, community service groups. And the great part about the Kinsmen is the work that they do flows back to the benefit of our residents. So when I look at supporting this one, I think we were able to separate out the specific fundraising elements that they had in their request from the capital items that they use on an ongoing in all of their events. And just so happens in this particular time, the request came through at a time when we had just seen Place Maillard celebrations, great event, and the Kinsmen were there. We had seen the next morning was the fishing derby, and the Kinsmen were there. And I think when we look around the community and see so many of the great initiatives that they get involved in, so many of the events that they're at, and they're out there covering their costs, but also raising money to put back to the community. You look back to the park on Como Lake, that was the Kinsman Park for years. I think it's a great opportunity. So when I looked at this one, I think we were able to separate out enough of the piece that was fundraising and really focused on the capital needs that this organization has to do the great job that they do in our city, supporting so many great things. And so I'm going to support this completely. I understand the temporary funds transferred from LAS. And I believe, given the numbers that we'll see, we would see roughly $250,000 quarterly that comes into this fund, based on past records with the casino and the revenue they generate. So I'm quite comfortable that these decisions that we're making today, we'll see the money come again in the fall, replenish what we need to with the $44,000, and still leave adequate funds to take us into the future supporting these community groups. So I'm going to support this completely, and I want to thank staff for all their great work on it. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I support the previous comments. Actually, I think some of these kinds of funding mechanisms are some of the most important funds we provide out of the casino. They're funds that really make changes on the street in our community. They build capacity both within Coquitlam and within the not-for-profits and the service clubs that work in Coquitlam. Specific to the Kinsman effort, we did separate out the fundraising element from the capacity building element. The building the capacity of any of our organizations is vitally important from my perspective. We, for example, if a festival like Festival du Bois, for example, had an element where they were renting something every year, and they applied for a grant so they wouldn't have to rent it every year, and as a result they could actually build a return on the festival that would be reinvested in our community. Technically that doesn't meet the challenge anymore. We could actually do it if they couldn't make a profit, but if they made any money at all on the festival, we would say, well, that's fundraising and therefore you're not eligible. So I think we need to tweak that element of the spirit grants to make it so that capacity building, even where it's capacity building that could result in fundraising efforts that get plowed back into our community, can be supported. And I agree actually with the comments on Communities in Bloom. I've had arguments at various national and provincial conferences with the nice folks at Communities in Bloom, not arguments, but discussions, because their name is wrong. It makes it sound like it's a floral display contest thing, and it isn't that at all. It's communities that, for whatever reason, take on a challenge. Sometimes it's communities that have lost their major industry. It's communities that have decided to really embrace community efforts, typically volunteerism efforts. I've been to a number of communities in the context of Communities in Bloom, like Kamloops, for example, or Trail, where these are communities where they embraced Communities in Bloom, and almost none of their efforts were floral. There were efforts at driving or engaging service clubs like the Lions or the Optimists or the Kinsmen into building their community and to truly, volunteering in a way that drives a new spirit of community. And that's what Communities in Bloom did for us last year in Coquitlam, and we've got one of our staff persons who's tremendously passionate about Communities in Bloom because she's been a judge for many years, and she's been able to see some of the improvements, some of the great things that communities have done with Communities in Bloom program, and almost none of them involve a flower. They're simply their engagement of a community and building community spirit. So the name is odd. And as a result, sometimes the name gets used to mischaracterize the program as being about prettying up a city, and it isn't that at all. So I support those elements. In the end, can we use the casino monies in some way to build the capacity of our community, to build the ability of service clubs like Kinsman and Rotary and Lions and Seroptimists, build their capacity so that we get more and more return out of the casino funds than simply buying a bench or buying some fixed asset. And in many cases, we've shown that we can do that through these community grants, and I absolutely support this round. And I would support, if there's not enough money in that fund, actually finding another way to do it, because this is some of the best money that we're investing into our community. Councillor O'Neill, for the second round, do you have a
clarifying question?
Sure,
Thank you very much. Both Councillor Marsden and Mayor Stewart said that the fundraising aspects of the Kinsman grant application had been separated out, and what remained was more of a infrastructure building of capacity thing. However, earlier when I was asking questions through the chair of the General Manager of Parks, Rec and Culture, and I asked him to talk about which of these which of the things on pages 4 and 5 specifically didn't meet the initial fundraising criteria. He named the Kinsman Club application of one that was outside the bounds, and he agreed that there should have been an asterisk there that said this was fundraisers are not typically approved. Led me to believe that this $73,100 that's recommended is going for a fundraising. So there's a bit of a discrepancy between what the General Manager said and what Councillor Marsden and the Mayor said, and I don't know how to get the answer for that unless somebody wants to further try to clarify.
Mr. Alueva.
Yes, I would try to do that through the chair. We don't have the detailed lists of every single aspect of every single grant request. Quite often there could be a specific event that has 32 components within it. There might be a rental of a stage. There could be some equipment. There could be lighting. There could be electrical, and there could be 50 things. And in some of those are eligible under a criteria. Some of them are not. Labor is not allowable. Some of the performance are not allowable. Some of the capital items are allowable. So we would go through a specific vetting process. When it comes to specific fundraisers, generally speaking, you know, as a fundraiser event, it is not eligible. In this case, the event, the fundraising event that was cited was not eligible. What is being alluded to is that there are components within this request, like tables and chairs and tents, that even though they were packaged as part of of an event, if you pull them apart, do we fund tents for a particular capital request for a group? Yeah, we can, depending on what they're used for. In this case, the decision was made that if those assets could be used in different ways to support this group, then this could be supported. And that's the process that went through.
Okay, so very clearly, I need to know, yes or no, is this $73,100 that recommended for the Kinsman Club of Coquitlam for fundraising for the Kinsman Club of Coquitlam? Is that for fundraising or not?
It is for fundraising.
It is for fundraising.
Yes.
Well, thank you.
Yes, it builds the capacity on the fundraising side. Yep, got it. Yeah, but you don't get to. Thank you. So the question is the Spirit of Coquitlam grants, the 2016 spring intake. All in favor? All opposed? Councillors O'Neill and Zerillo are opposed. The motion carries. Oh, and Asmussen. The motion carries.
Next item, item 7, pertains to the Metro Vancouver Board and Brief for its meeting of May 27th. One of our council representatives are available to respond to questions, and the recommendation is to receive the brief for information.
Moved by Councillor Rasmussen, second by Councillor Marsden. Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, I recall when on the first page of this report, that is the Regional Affordable Housing Strategy was approved. And when that came to council, we had some very specific concerns about the wording of that Regional Affordable Housing Strategy, about how it seemed to compel municipalities to do certain things, when we thought that maybe it should just urge or set a high watermark or something like that. Was the wording of this strategy eventually changed, or was some document issued to overlay saying these are all just recommendations or nice things we'd like you to do? Were they still thinking they can compel us to do these things?
In answer to your question, they no longer, they've never felt they could compel. It was odd wording. They actually acknowledged it at a meeting that I was at, where I said, you know, you can't actually require, Metro can't require anything of municipalities along these lines, and so it was, that was never their provision. And I see Mr. Steblin and Mr. McIntyre both wanting to offer some insight.
In the final analysis of this document, they did soften up the language significantly and simply talk about entering into dialogue with the municipalities, encourage that kind of thing, and is no longer the strong language we originally objected to. I don't know if Jim has anything further to add.
Yes, thanks, Your Worship. And just very briefly, as City Manager said, we saw we scanned the final wording that went forward, and staff felt it was a more acceptable tone and language. So I think some of our earlier concerns have been relayed, have been heeded.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Now, one follow-up. Were we the only municipality that raised these objections, or were other municipalities of similar mind and voice?
Mr. McIntyre.
Yes. I wasn't there personally, but I understand there had been discussions at the Regional Planning Advisory Committee about this, and I believe it wasn't just Coquitlam's staff representative. There's other municipalities from around the region that had some similar concerns, and so I think the Metro Van staff, and hearing that and hearing back from member municipalities more broadly, took that to heart.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Actually, it also came up at the Regional Planning and Agriculture Committee. I know the chair of that committee, and he raised it at the meeting. It's me, actually, but he raised it at the meeting, and there were a number of people whose eyebrows went up. They hadn't realized the wording was there, and as a result, I suspect there was some conversations with staff, and staff recognized that Metro Vancouver staff recognized that they were ultra vires on the wording, and couldn't enforce it if they tried. So it was, and in the end as well, many of these communities disagreed with some of those recommendations or some of those positions that would have put municipalities at almost a provincial role in the funding of affordable housing.
And I believe it was our staff that alerted council to some of this onerous wording in the first place, was it not? And
it was.
Yes. So, and I want to thank them for doing such a great job of doing that. And the circle gets completed, the problem is fixed. So, thank you very much. That's good.
Okay, good stuff. Anybody else on the Metro Vancouver Board and Brief? Councillor Cirillo.
I do, but it's not the board in brief. It's the letter on the 2016 Regional Food System Action Plan. Can I speak to that, through the chair? That was the one dated June 2nd. It's part of Metro Vancouver.
Is it on the agenda?
No, it's not on the agenda.
You probably can't.
Okay, why don't you speak to it for a moment before I rule you out of order?
I just thank you. We received a letter on June 2nd from Metro Vancouver, and it just asks for some steps for each of the municipalities. And one of them is to, bullet number 4, and says, assign a designated staff person to coordinate municipal participation in the implementation of the Metro Vancouver Regional Food System Action Plan. I'm just wondering if we are going ahead with these bullet points.
Mr. McIntyre.
Yes, thank you, Worship. I can't recall at which meeting, but I do believe this question has come up more generally about this matter from Metro Vancouver. I saw the letter too, through the chair to Councillor Cirillo. It's been referred to planning. We're having a look at it right now, and we will get back to council. I think that was the request, is for us to come back with the recommended appropriate response and follow up. So we're looking at that right now. I'm going to be meeting with staff later this week to get a little more up to speed on it. And again, it has been discussed at RPAC, the Regional Planning Advisory Committee. So I'll check with the staff member that attends that and get their advice. But we will get back to council on this in one form or another.
That would be awesome, because I'm consistently getting questions about chickens, and I think it was in the minutes today, and beehives are popping up, and so I'm interested to know what we're doing. Thank you.
Yep. And I've examined the board in brief, and on page 4 at the top is a section called Love, Food, Hate, Waste, and I'm going to use that to accept your agenda item. Any further discussion about the Metro board in brief? All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Moved by Councillor Morrison, seconded by Councillor Asmundson to adjourn. I know that all of council has already scheduled their blood donation tomorrow, but we encourage everyone else to get out there and donate blood. All in favor? Opposed? Sorry, that was all in favor of adjournment, not all in favor of donating blood. Carried unanimously. Are there any questions from the audience on tonight's agenda? Any question at all, including the regional food strategy, which we've added to the agenda? Anybody all? Last chance. Thank you all for coming.